Islam's teachings and how they solve past and current problems Part 2. Is it possible for human nature to mix with animal nature? Is marriage between a human and a cow, or any of the different types of animals, acceptable? Such that the result would be the birth of a half-human half-cow, or any of the different types of animals, and thus the animal nature becomes a mixed with human nature? Is it possible for an intelligent person to accept such? Of course not, as it would be make humans of an inferior nature and lesser rank, while God the Creator, blessed and exalted, honor them. Humans are therefore of a more honorable rank and higher status than animals, in spite of the fact that they all were created by God the Creator, lofty and exalted. If this is the case concerning the humanistic nature and animalistic nature, in spite of the fact that both are part of the creation, then what would it be if it pertained to God the Creator, glorified and exalted, who created human beings and all other animals and creatures? Is it possible for an untainted soul to accept the alleged mix of godly nature, God the Creator, and human nature, the weak creature that Allah, exalted, created from nothing, as it was in the first creation, and who performs the act of procreation? The creature that was born from the birth canal of its mother, became a suckling in need of tenderness and care, and who will eventually die and be buried thereafter. Like all other creatures, such that human nature is one of the natures and representations of God, the Creator? Of course not, because that would be considered a flaw, shortcoming and lessening of the value of God the Creator, as He, glorified and exalted, is the Creator of humans and all other creatures. Therefore, Islam brought the concept that Allah, glorified and exalted, is the one and only God, who is not fragmented, who does not beget nor was he begotten. And there is nothing similar or comparable to him at all. Islam also calls for the exaltation of the attributes of God the Creator, glorified and exalted, and avoiding degrading him by describing him or representing him in the shape of stones and statues. Does it make sense that after Allah, glorified and exalted, created mankind from nothing, that mankind then fabricates different statues, fashioning his God and Creator into different forms in spite of the fact that mankind has never seen his Creator, then another person fabricates his God and Creator into different forms and shapes? And so on and so forth. God the Creator is loftier and more magnificent than any representation that any of the creation may fashion him into. Also, we find that the many different types, shapes and sizes of representations and statues are the cause for the human soul to incline towards exalting them, especially if large and intimidating. And after some time worshipping them, which is witnessed in many countries, directing their invocations to them and away from Allah, exalted, while He is the true God who alone deserves adoration, exaltation and worship. Allah, glorified and exalted, is God the Creator and Originator, everything else is created and manufactured. Hence, there is apparent wisdom in Islam's prohibition of drawing and fashioning God the Creator in the shapes of stones and statues. We must truly exalt and venerate Him. Continuing to answer to the third of the aforementioned questions, why did Allah, exalted, create and originate mankind? A question which the mind struggles to answer. We find that Islam clarifies that Allah, blessed and exalted, God, the Creator, created mankind to worship and obey Him, guided by His directions and guidance. He obeys His commands, abstains from His prohibitions and enacts His legislation, as a test from Him, glorified and exalted, for mankind throughout His entire life. Beginning from the age of maturity, the age in which mankind is able to marry and procreate, until his death. This test is divided into two parts that can be concisely clarified in the following manner. Their first part, the first test, which is the biggest part of the exam. Will a person believe in his God and Creator, acknowledge His existence and His favors upon him, and avoid associating anything with Him in His divinity? Or will he deny his God and Creator, renounce His favors upon him, and associate others with Him in His divinity? This first part of the test is considered the foundation upon which the second test is built. If a person succeeds at passing it, by believing in God the Creator and Originator, acknowledging His existence and favors upon him, and not associating anything with Him in His divinity, he becomes qualified to pass the second test. If he does not pass it, then passing the second test is of no use to him. The second part, the second test. Will the person worship his God and Creator, in whom he believes, whose sole divinity he affirms and whose favors he acknowledges, obey Him in the manner in which he wishes and exalt His commands? Or will he be lazy in his worship and obedience to Him, forget His favors upon him and detest what He commanded him with? Will he be thankful to his God and Creator for the favors which He bestowed upon him and provided him with, patient and not despair over the trials and tribulations that Allah, exalted, decreed for him, according to His absolute wisdom, lofty and exalted? Or will he neglect being thankful to his God and Creator, forgetful of His favors upon him? desperate and impatient over the trials and tribulations that Allah, Exalted, decreed for him according to his absolute wisdom, lofty and exalted? If a person succeeds in passing this part of the test, the second test, by worshipping and obeying his God and Creator in the manner in which he wishes, is thankful to him for his favors upon him, is patient and does not despair over the trials and tribulations that Allah, Exalted, decreed for him, in addition to succeeding at passing the first test, then he, by the grace of Allah, blessed and exalted, will deserve the forgiveness of Allah, blessed and exalted, as well as the greatest toward which he, glorified and exalted, prepared for whomever struggles and succeeds in this test. Paradise, and all the magnificent and everlasting delights therein, including the luxury and pleasure of seeing God the Creator, lofty and exalted, who has no equal. In addition to his eternal pleasure upon them, whoever enters it, paradise, which Allah, blessed and exalted, created, will have enjoyment, never again feel misery, and will live forever and never die again. If a person does not succeed in the tests, the first and second tests, then he, by the justice of Allah, glorified and exalted, deserves of the wrath of Allah, lofty and exalted, deprivation from his paradise, and entrance into his hellfire, the fire which Allah, lofty and exalted, created, and all the painful and severe punishment therein. The length of the test, the entire period of a person's life, beginning from the age of maturity, the age at which a person becomes able to marry and procreate, until his death. The level of the test, Allah, blessed and exalted, does not burden a soul more than its scope and power. He does not burden his slaves with that which they are powerless over, which is why the test placed by Allah, glorified and exalted, is on an equal level with all of his legally capable, mature and intelligent creation. An example of the test, in order to clarify its nature, Allah, exalted, may create a healthy and able-bodied person and provide him with wealth and make him rich. He, glorified and exalted, may also create another person who is unwell and handicapped, for example, missing a hand, foot or other body parts, and provide him insignificant wealth and make him poor. Thus, the first person's particular test, the healthy and wealthy one, after belief in his God and Creator and the oneness of his divinity, is a matter of thankfulness, meaning, will he be thankful to his God and Creator for those favors and fulfill his rights concerning them? Will he assist the sick and handicapped, be kind to the poor and needy, giving them from the wealth that Allah, exalted, provided him with? Anticipating the reward and recompense with his God and Creator, believing in the magnificence of his wisdom in that which he, lofty and exalted, decreed for him, and thereby fulfill those commands of his God and Creator that are within his capabilities? If that is the case, then he will have succeeded at passing the test, and will therefore be eligible to attain his God and Creator's paradise, and all of the everlasting delights therein, as well as his pleasure upon him. Or, will a healthy and wealthy person be the exact opposite? The second person's particular test, the unwell, handicapped and poor person, after belief in his God and Creator and the oneness of his divinity, is a matter of patience, meaning, will he have patience with the trials and tribulations that Allah, exalted, decreed for him, such as illness, handicap and poverty, etc., pleased and not desperate? Anticipating the reward and recompense with his God and Creator, believing in the magnificence of his wisdom in that which he, lofty and exalted, decreed for him, acknowledging Allah's grace upon him in the form of other favors and blessings, fulfilling his God and Creator's commands as much as he has the power and ability to, as Allah, blessed and exalted, does not burden his creation, nor does he command them with what they are incapable of, in this short span of worldly life that he is living, thereby succeeding at passing the test, and deserving his God and Creator's paradise and all of the eternal delights therein, as well as his pleasure upon him? Or, will he be the exact opposite of that? Another example of the test, in order to clarify its nature, we find that Allah, exalted, prohibited everything bad and harmful for humans, and permitted everything good and beneficial, for example. When Allah, glorified and exalted, prohibited mankind from eating swine because of the diseases it causes, which have been recently discovered, he, blessed and exalted, permitted all other good types of meat like camel, beef, mutton, goat and many types of fowl. Also, when Allah, glorified and exalted, prohibited mankind from drinking intoxicants and alcoholic beverages because of its destruction of the mind, its consequences, such as misbehaving, crimes, evil actions and animalistic behaviors, he, blessed and exalted, permitted all the other good and beneficial beverages. In this manner, the test that Allah, glorified and exalted, prepared for a person is within his power and within the realms of what benefits and suits him. So, will mankind respond to his God and Creator, glorified and exalted, by fulfilling his commands and abstaining from his prohibitions? Or will he respond to the desires of his soul and oppose the commands of his God and Creator, glorified and exalted, treating them with carelessness and not exalting them? It is important to mention that Allah, glorified and exalted, knows the end result of the test that he placed for a person before its results manifest, for he, glorified and exalted, is the creator and originator of the person from nothing. He, glorified and exalted, has more knowledge about a person than the person himself, and he is all-knowing about what thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, deeds, obedience and disobedience a person will carry out. He is all aware of everything, as he is God, the Creator, and there is nothing like him. We will pause here with two important questions, which are: since Allah, glorified and exalted, knows the results of the tests from the start, as well as what beliefs, behaviors, deeds, obedience and disobedience a person will carry out, why did he not send those who deserve his punishment to hellfire straight away, and why did he not send those who earned his pleasure to paradise straight away, without the test? What is the wisdom of Allah, exalted, in placing this test upon mankind? The answers to these two questions are: first, the answer to the first question: if he sent those deserving of punishment to hellfire straight away, we would find them asking, why was I sent to hellfire? What is my sin? And what is the proof that if I were to be tested by Allah, exalted, I would belie and disobey him? To clarify this, suppose there was a father who has a son in a particular level of his education. This son does not care about his education or studies, in spite of his father's advice to study and warnings of his punishment if he does not succeed in his exams. The son knows that he will be tested at the end of the year, and the father knows that his son does not care about his education and studies. Hence he knows with near certainty that his son will not succeed in the exams because of the son's negligence regarding studying and his carelessness about the exams and the advice and warnings of his father. In spite of this, the father gives respite to his son, and continues to advise him. He does not punish him until the results reveal his failure in the exam, in order for it to be an argument against him. For if the father punishes the son before taking the exam and seeing his exam's result, the son may lie and say, I have memorized all that I studied in school and I do not need to study. Moreover, he may say, why are you punishing me? Allah's example, glorified and exalted, is the highest, for in spite of the fact that he, lofty and exalted, has complete knowledge of the condition of his creation, and what beliefs and deeds they will carry out, because his most beautiful attributes are perfect and absolute, glorified and exalted, and his knowledge, lofty and exalted, is vast and encompassing. He, however, from his perfect wisdom, gives them respite and incites them and warns them, through dispatching his prophets and messengers to them, in order to inform them that he loves and is pleased with them when they believe in him. And in the oneness of his divinity, worship him and obey him, he promises them paradise, and all the magnificent, eternal delights therein, and incites them towards it. He also warns them of his wrath upon them and his punishment for them if they belie and deny him and his existence, associate partners with him in his divinity, or disobey him. Hence, none of his creation will have an argument against him on the day of resurrection, day of reckoning. Indeed, Islam clarifies that Allah, glorified and exalted, is the truth and the just, and he does not oppress his slaves. He, glorified and exalted, has the absolute argument against all of his creation, and no one has an argument against him. Therefore, the wisdom of Allah, exalted, requires that there be a day for reckoning and questioning about what people believed about God the Creator, lofty and exalted, as well as what actions and deeds they sent forth in the worldly life, which is considered the test for all humans, and that not only the actions and deeds of a person testify for or against him on the day of resurrection, the day of revival and reckoning, but also his skin, hands and feet will testify against him regarding the actions and deeds he sent forth. Not therefore, no single one of them will have an argument against Allah, exalted. We will also find that the ones who are admitted to paradise, after tests and trials, will feel the extreme favor of Allah, exalted, upon them, in his guiding them, belief in him, aiding them in worshipping and obeying him, and blessing them to pass this test and succeed in it, since without the guidance, assistance and blessing of Allah, blessed and exalted, a person is unable to do anything. Thus their love and thankfulness to Allah will increase. Secondly, the answer to the second question. Allah, exalted, the wise and all-knowing, wished to place this test as a measure for mankind, either believing in him and the oneness of his divinity, glorified and exalted, and worshipping and obeying him, or denying him and associating partners with him and his divinity, and disobeying him, as well as to determine the levels of their efforts to worship and obey him. Moreover, Allah, blessed and exalted, divided paradise and the delights therein, which he prepared for his believing, worshipping, slaves, into high degrees and stations, in addition to all of its magnificent delights. So that the person who believed in his God and Creator and the oneness of his divinity may enter it and ascend, according to the degree of his efforts to exalt, love and worship his God and Creator, his hastening to obey him, his fulfillment of his commands, and his abstaining from his prohibitions. Likewise, Allah, Exalted, divided hellfire into descending steps and sections, so that the person who denied his God and Creator and associated partners with him would enter it and be tormented according to the degree of his denial and disobedience. An example of what we are alluding to is the tests and exams in life that measure a person's level and skill, according to his efforts, which then determine the best universities, faculties and specialties that are best suited for him, as well as the profession he will enter into thereafter. And in spite of the high status and appraisal of all of them, there are still others that are better and considered first class, in terms of their high rankings, and all the others come after them. Continuing to answer the fourth of the aforementioned questions. What is the wisdom of God the Creator, in creating mankind and subjecting him to the aforementioned? Such a question requires a bit of intelligence to answer it, therefore we clarify that. Firstly, Islam makes it clear that Allah, glorified and exalted, is all-knowing, all-wise and all-aware, and all that he wills and does are in the realms of his bounty and justice, and in accordance with the vastness of his knowledge and perfection of his wisdom. Secondly, Allah, blessed and exalted, the wise and all-knowing, willed that he would create the angels, as one form of his creation, lofty and exalted, before creating humans, and that he would create a natural disposition in them to worship and obey him and never disobey him. He did not create them with the freedom to choose whether or not to obey him, and as such they are naturally disposed and compelled to execute his commands and avoid disobeying him in anything. Therefore, it was from the wisdom of Allah, Exalted, that he created a new and different type of creation in a new manner, in that he would command them to worship and obey him, giving them free will to choose between belief in him and the oneness of his divinity, or associating partners with him. He also gives them free will to choose between obeying or disobeying him, as well as the freedom to strive and draw closer to him, exalt him, love him, fulfill his commands and abstain from his prohibitions in order to attain his forgiveness and pleasure upon them, or the opposite. And this is the wisdom of Allah, blessed and exalted, in the creation of paradise and its high degrees and stations, as well as his creation, lofty and exalted, of hellfire and its degrading and depressing steps and section. After explaining Islam's magnificent message regarding God the Creator, lofty and exalted, we wish to pause for a question that may come to mind and consequently needs to be answered, which is, what is the fate in the hereafter of a person who dies without Islam having reached him? What about one who is insane, who does not know about Islam? What about a baby or small child? The answer to this question, on the day of resurrection, God, the Creator, lofty and exalted, will test the one who never heard about Islam as well as the insane person who does not know about Islam, with the test is suitable and consistent with each one's capabilities, and he, glorified and exalted, is most knowledgeable about the results of this test. This is so that no one will have any argument against him, and also to apply to them the same test that was applied to the rest of their species, since the rest of the creation and human slaves of Allah, exalted, were tested in the worldly life. Thus, he does not oppress any one of his slaves, and that is from his perfect wisdom, lofty and exalted, as Allah, glorified and exalted, is the truth and the just. On the other hand, the same person who heard about Islam and its correct understanding will have the proof established against him and will have no excuse in front of Allah, exalted. Allah, blessed and exalted, will admit the baby and small child into his paradise and home of delights without any test, and this is from his bounty and kindness, blessed and exalted. Let us pause here with an important and final question regarding this point, which is, a person may say, if Allah, mighty and exalted, has asked me before creating me, I would have chosen to be created with an instinctive belief in him, glorified and exalted, not associating anything with his divinity, and to be compelled to obey him and not disobey him. Moreover, I would not have undergone this test for fear that I would not pass it successfully. So why did Allah, exalted, ask me? A person may say, if Allah, mighty and exalted, has asked me before creating me, I would have chosen to be created with an instinctive belief in him, glorified and exalted, not associating anything with his divinity, and to be compelled to obey him and not disobey him. Moreover, I would not have undergone this test for fear that I would not pass it successfully. So why did Allah, exalted, ask me and leave me the freedom to choose? The answer to this question, let us firstly explain that Islam makes it clear that Allah, glorified and exalted, is the creator of everything, that he, glorified and exalted, created the universe and all of the creatures within it, and that the universe and all of the creatures within it, heavens, earth, mountains, seas, rivers and trees, worship their God and Creator, Allah, glorified and exalted, and glorify his praises in a manner unknown to human beings, such as The rotation of electrons around a nucleus of an atom from which different types of substances are formed. This is one illustration of glorification and worship of God the Creator. Lofty and exalted, which is similar to Muslims' worship of God the Creator, lofty and exalted. During their circumambulation of the Holy Kaaba at the sacred mosque, the first mosque on the earth built for the worship of Allah, exalted, alone, glorifying the praises of Allah, exalted, alone. Exalting Him, declaring Him far above any and everything, and thanking Him for His favors. Islam also makes it clear that Allah, exalted, is God the Creator and Originator, and the Able, and that while in the molecular stage, He asked each person, while they were still drops of fluid in the innermost parts of their father Adam, the first human being, peace be upon him, in a particular manner that he, glorified, and exalted, knows, by the will of Allah, exalted. In a later point we will allude to the scientific fact that was recently discovered, and its agreement with Islam's assertion that each person was a drop in the innermost parts of their father Adam, and gave them the choice to be like other types of creation that instinctively believe in him, glorified and exalted, do not associate anything with him in his divinity, are compelled to obey him, and never disobey him, therefore never being tested, and neither entering paradise nor hellfire. Or, for him to be given the ability to choose, in the form of a test, between belief in him, glorified, and exalted, not associating anything with him in his divinity, obedience to him and fulfilling his commands, therefore entering paradise and delighting in all its everlasting pleasures, as a reward for successfully passing the test. And between denying his divinity, associating others as partners with him, disobeying him and not fulfilling his commands, therefore deserving punishment, as he did not successfully pass the test, as a penalty for his carelessness and neglect concerning the rights of his God and Creator by denying and disbelieving in his divinity and oneness, denying his favors and failing to exalt him and his commands, thereby having complete free will and freedom to choose one or the other with no compulsion to do anything. And because the human soul yearns and longs for pleasure, a person will no doubt strive for paradise, and the magnificent and everlasting delights therein, and hope to spend eternity therein. Thus, his selection is to be given the choice, in the manner we just mentioned, without taking into account the responsibility that would fall on him, as his choice would demand for him to not be deluded or fooled by the worldly life and its fleeting charms, nor be distracted by it from obedience to and fulfilling the commands of his God and Creator. And a person may say that he does not remember that question, and this is natural, as mankind was named such, in son, due to his forgetfulness. Indeed, as time passes, mankind forgets and his ability to remember decreases. So what of an event that's occurred ages ago? And particularly because the wisdom and will of Allah, exalted, necessitates that mankind's memory of this event be erased, yet the fact is that it did take place. However, since Allah, exalted, informed about it on the tongue of the seal of his prophets and messengers, Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, who brought Islam as a way of life, and was aided by his Lord with miracles and supernatural phenomena that were a testament to his being a prophet and messenger and confirmed that which he conveyed, we must believe in and affirm it. To get a clearer picture, let each person ask himself this question once more. If he was given the choice all over again, would he prefer to be predisposed and compelled to glorify and worship his God and Creator in a certain manner, not be tested, and not enter paradise or hellfire? Or would he prefer to be tested by Allah, exalted, on the basis that he will be granted paradise and the magnificent, everlasting delights therein if he successfully passed the test, or deserving of his punishment if he was neglectful and did not pass it? However, in order for a person to be honest with himself, he must ask this question at a time other than the hard and uneasy times of worry and strife in the worldly life that he is living, a time of mental clarity, in order to be firm in his answer. A person will realize that he accommodates his soul by choosing his current situation of tests and trials, hoping to attain paradise and its delights, striving to spend eternity therein, particularly since the test is not one that he is incapable of passing successfully. Rather, the test is on a general level, as Allah, blessed and exalted, does not burden the soul with more than it has the capacity and capability to bear. Thus, we say that Allah, glorified and exalted, spoke the truth in his noble book the Quran, upon the tongue of the seal of his prophets and messengers, Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. Also, if a person asks himself does he prefer to be created in a form other than his human form, like other types creation, for example, an inanimate object like a rock, mountain, or otherwise, that are predisposed and compelled to glorify and worship their God and Creator in a particular manner, until the time that Allah, exalted, decrees for him to cease existing, as no one has the superiority over Allah, exalted, to initiate any of his creation, nor to cease the existence of any of his creation, and thereafter will not be tested nor will he enter paradise or hellfire. Or, does he prefer to be created in his human form, as a person, enjoying those things with which Allah, Exalted, honored him, like a mind, a heart, a soul and senses, and be tested by Allah, Exalted? On the basis that if he successfully passes the test, he will be granted paradise and its magnificent, everlasting delights, or if he neglects it and fails it, he will be deserving of his punishment? Surely, because of what we just touched upon, he would answer that he chooses his current condition of being created as a human to be tested by Allah, Exalted.